Ambassador stood in the great hall of the Galactic Concord. The hall was enormous. It could hold 10,000 beings from 100 different worlds. But today, only the council of 12 species had gathered. They sat in a circle of floating chairs, each one designed for a different body shape. Some had 4 arms. Some had no arms at all. Some breathed gases that would kill others in seconds. Wazen, his people were tall and thin, with skin like gray silk and eyes that glowed soft blue. He had served as ambassador for 200 years. In all that time, he had never been afraid to speak. But today, his voice shook. "The humans have discovered faster-than-light theory," he said. "Our scientists believe they will have working ships within 50 years." The council chamber went silent. The word human had that effect. It always did. High Chancellor leaned forward. She was old, even by the standards of her long-lived species. Her face was covered in patterns that shifted like oil on water. "Are you certain?" she asked. "Yes, Chancellor. We have watched them for 3,000 years. They learn faster than any species we have ever seen. They went from wooden boats to nuclear weapons in less than 500 years. They are relentless." Admiral of the Dominion made a sound of disgust. She had 4 arms and all of them were crossed. Her people were warriors. They had conquered 60 worlds before joining the conquered. "Then we destroy them now," she said, "before they become a real threat." "We cannot," said quietly. "Cannot, my fleet could glass their planet in hours. They have no shields, no plasma weapons. Their ships still use chemical fuel. They are children playing with fire." Looked at the Admiral with tired eyes. "Do you remember what happened to the first scouts we sent to Earth?" The chamber went silent again. Everyone remembered. It was the reason the barrier existed. 3,000 years ago, the Conquered had discovered Earth. It was a small blue world in a quiet corner of the galaxy. The life there was primitive but promising, so the Conquered sent a scout ship to observe. The ship carried 12 crew members. 6 of them were psychics from the Enclave. They were the most gifted telepaths in the galaxy. They could read thoughts across star systems. They could feel emotions from light years away. They were supposed to study the humans from orbit and report what they found. Instead, they went mad. The moment the ship entered Earth's outer atmosphere, all 6 psychics began to scream. They clawed at their own faces. They begged for the feelings to stop. The captain pulled the ship back into deep space, but it was too late. 3 of the psychics died within hours. The other 3 never spoke again. They spent the rest of their lives staring at nothing, tears running down their faces. The captain recorded his final report before he too fell silent. "They feel too much. The humans feel too much, and they do not know they are broadcasting." That was when the Conquered understood what humans truly were. Most species in the galaxy had some level of psychic ability. It was as common as sight or hearing. But humans were different. They had no psychic senses at all. They could not read minds or feel the emotions of others. They were completely blind to the mental world. But they were not silent. They were the opposite of silent. Humans felt emotions with an intensity that no other species could match. Joy, grief, rage, love, fear, hope. They burned with feeling every moment of their lives, and without knowing it, they projected those feelings into the fabric of reality itself. A single human in pain could make a telepath weep from across a room. A crowd of humans celebrating could overwhelm psychics on the other side of a planet. And a world of 8 billion humans, all feeling, all the time. It was like standing next to a star, beautiful, blinding, deadly. So the Conquered made a decision. They built a barrier around Earth's solar system. It was made of warped space, invisible and unbreakable. No human ship could pass through it. No human signal could escape it. The humans never knew they were trapped. They looked up at the stars and dreamed of reaching them. They sent radio signals into the void, hoping someone would answer. They built telescopes and satellites and space stations. And the galaxy watched in silence. Some on the council felt guilt. The humans had done nothing wrong. They did not choose to be what they were. They did not even know they were dangerous. But the conquered had decided that the safety of the galaxy was more important than one small species on one small world. Now, 3,000 years later, that decision was coming back to haunt them. The barrier has worked for, Chancellor said. It will continue to work. The humans cannot break through. That is true, agreed. But there is another problem. He paused, and his blue eyes dimmed with sorrow. The barrier is killing their son. The council members looked at each other in confusion. When we built the barrier, we did not fully understand how it would interact with their star over time, explained. The warped space has been putting pressure on their sun for 3,000 years, slowly, invisibly, but now the damage is done. Our scientists have calculated that their sun will become unstable within 20 years. It will expand and consume the inner planets. Earth will be destroyed. Then the problem solves itself, Admiral said, but her voice was uncertain. Does it? Asked. 8 billion humans will die. 8 billion minds all feeling the same thing at the same moment. Terror, grief, rage at the universe that killed them. Do you understand what that will do to every psychic being in the galaxy? The Chancellor's face went pale. It would be felt everywhere. It would be more than felt. It would be a psychic shockwave, a wave of death and despair that would spread across every star system. Telepaths would die. Empaths would go mad. The enclave would be wiped out entirely. Silence filled the chamber. The weight of their mistake pressed down on all of them. Then senior telepath of the enclave raised her head. She was the youngest member of the council, but her psychic gifts were the strongest of her generation. Her eyes were closed, and her face was twisted in pain. "It is too late for planning," she whispered. "Something is happening right now on Earth." She opened her eyes, and they were filled with tears. "They know," she said. "The humans know everything, and they are sending a message." Before anyone could respond, collapsed to the floor. Around her, every psychically sensitive being in the chamber did the same. And across the galaxy, on 1 billion worlds, minds went silent as something vast and terrible washed over them. Earth was speaking, and the galaxy had no choice but to listen. The message was not made of words. It was not a radio signal or a beam of light. It was something far older and far more powerful. It was pure feeling, pushed out from 8 billion minds at once, burning through the fabric of space like fire through dry grass. Lay on the floor of the council chamber, her body shaking. The other psychics were the same. Some had curled into balls. Some were weeping. Admirala, who had always claimed she had no psychic ability at all, had fallen to her knees with her hands pressed against her head. Chancellor was one of the few still standing. Her species had very weak psychic senses. She could feel only a shadow of what the others were experiencing, but even that shadow was enough to make her tremble. "What are they saying?" she demanded. "What is the message?" Tried to speak, but only a sob came out. She had spent her entire life training to control her telepathic gifts. She had touched the minds of dying stars and dreaming gods. Nothing had prepared her for this. The humans were not just sending thoughts. They were sending themselves, their memories, their hopes, their fears. 3,000 years of looking up at the stars and wondering why no one answered. 3,000 years of loneliness pressed into a single moment of contact. And underneath all of it, burning like a sun, was rage. Slowly pulled herself up onto her hands and knees. Her tears fell onto the polished floor. "They know," she gasped. "They know about the barrier. They know we have been watching them. They know. They know we did nothing while their son died." How asked, how could they possibly know? "I do not understand it fully, but they felt us. All these years they felt us watching. They thought they were alone in the universe. They thought the silence meant no one was out there, but some part of them always knew. Some part of them could feel our eyes on them." Laughed, and the sound was broken. "They called it paranoia. They called it imagination. They were wrong." More council members were recovering now. They sat up slowly, like survivors of a disaster. Their faces were pale and their eyes were wide. The message pressed. What exactly did they say? Closed her eyes. When she spoke again, her voice was different, deeper, harder, as if she was channeling something from very far away. "We know what you did," she said. "We know you built a cage around our sky. We know you watched us struggle and grow and reach for the stars, and you did nothing. You said nothing. For 3,000 years, we screamed into the void and you let us believe we were alone." The council chamber was utterly silent. No one moved, no one breathed. "We do not know why you did this," continued. "We do not know what we did to make you fear us, and now it does not matter, because you have killed our world. Our sun is dying, our home is dying, and we will not die with it." Her eyes opened, and they glowed with borrowed fire. "We are coming out, every ship we can build, every soul we can carry. We are bringing our children and our history and our dead. We are bringing everything we are. And when we reach your stars, we will remember. We will remember every prayer that hit your barrier and died. We will remember every night we spent wondering why the universe was so empty. We will remember that you could have been our friends and you chose to be our jailers." Stood up, her small body seemed larger somehow, filled with something too big for her frame. "This is not a request for help. This is not a surrender. This is a warning. Prepare your worlds, open your borders, make room for us among your stars, because humans do not die quietly, and we do not die alone." The message ended, collapsed again, and this time she did not get up. Medics rushed to her side, but she was still breathing. She had simply emptied out. The humans had poured themselves through her, and now she was hollow. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Admiral broke the silence. "That was not a plea," she said. Her voice was hoarse. "That was a declaration of war." "No," Chancellor said quietly. "It was neither. It was a promise." She looked around the chamber at her fellow council members. They were the leaders of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. They had commanded fleets and conquered worlds. They had shaped the destiny of trillions of beings. And now they were afraid of a species that had not yet left its own solar system. "We need to discuss our response," said. "We have options. We could reinforce the barrier. We could send a fleet to intercept them before they reach civilized space. We could." "You did not feel what I felt," interrupted a voice from the floor. It was an elder who had been unconscious until now. He was very old and his skin was almost transparent. "I have lived for 800 years. I have touched 10,000 minds. I have felt joy and sorrow and everything in between." He looked up at the Chancellor with ancient eyes. "I have never felt anything like that. The humans do not just feel emotions. They burn with them. Their love could light a star. Their grief could crush a planet. And their anger," he shuddered. "Their anger is a weapon more powerful than any fleet." "They have no real weapons," argued. "Their technology is primitive." "Their technology does not matter," said. "You still do not understand. When they come, and they will come, every psychic in the galaxy will feel them approaching. And we will not be able to fight them. We will feel what they feel. Their determination will become our determination. Their will to survive will become our will to help them survive." He closed his eyes. "They are not sending ships," he whispered. "They are sending a fire, and everything it touches will burn." The council debated for hours. Some wanted to attack. Some wanted to hide. Some wanted to reach out and apologize, to beg forgiveness for 3,000 years of silence. In the end, they made the only decision they could. They lowered the barrier, not out of kindness, but because keeping it up would only make the sun die faster. They hoped that maybe, without the barrier, the humans would have more time. Maybe the galaxy would have more time to prepare. But even as the barrier fell, sensors across the Concord detected something new. Thousands of heat signatures on Earth's surface. Factories working around the clock. Rockets launching by the dozen. The humans were not waiting for anyone to save them. They were building their own salvation. And they were coming. The Exodus Armada launched on the 47th day after the barrier fell. It was the largest fleet ever built by any species in the history of the galaxy. It was also the ugliest. The humans had no time to build beautiful ships. They had no time to build proper ships at all. They took everything they had and turned it into something that could fly. Space stations were torn apart and rebuilt with engines. Satellites were welded together into massive carriers. Asteroids were hollowed out and filled with life support systems. Cargo ships, passenger liners, military vessels, research stations, anything that could hold air and move through space became part of the fleet. 12,000 ships, 8 billion humans, the entire population of Earth packed into metal shells and launched toward the stars. From the outside, the fleet looked like a cloud of debris, a swarm of junk held together by hope and desperation. Military analysts across the conquered laughed when they saw it. These ships had no shields, no plasma cannons, no FTL drives that actually worked. Most of them were using experimental technology that had never been tested. "They will die before they reach the outer planets," Admiral A reported to the Council. "Their ships are falling apart. Their engines are failing. They are losing dozens of vessels every day." But she did not sound relieved. She sounded worried. Because the humans were not dying. When a ship failed, other ships would stop to rescue the survivors. When an engine exploded, engineers would spacewalk between vessels to make repairs. They were losing ships, yes, but they were not losing people. They refused to leave anyone behind. And the whole time, they were broadcasting. Not radio signals, not messages, just themselves. 8 billion minds all feeling the same thing at the same time. Fear of the dark, love for the people beside them, grief for the world they were leaving behind, hope for the world they might find. It washed over the galaxy like a tide. On Prime, poets stopped writing because no words could capture what they were feeling from across the stars. On the, soldiers wept in their barracks, overwhelmed by a longing they could not name. On the telepaths sealed themselves in shielded rooms and still could not escape the flood of human emotion. The Council of 12 Species met every day now. They had to make a decision. The human fleet was slow, but it was moving. In 6 months it would reach the edge of conquered space. Something had to be done. "We send a military fleet," Admiral A argued. "Not to attack, we know now that would be complicated, but to establish a perimeter, to control where they can go. We cannot let them spread unchecked across the galaxy." Chancellor nodded slowly. "A reasonable approach. How many ships?" 3,000, enough to surround them, enough to guide them toward an empty system where they can be contained. "Contained," repeated, his voice was bitter. "Another barrier, another cage, have we learned nothing?" "What would you have us do?" A demanded. "Let them go wherever they want. They will destabilize every system they enter. Our people cannot handle their emotions. Our societies will collapse." "Perhaps," said, "or perhaps our societies need to collapse. Perhaps we have been hiding from feeling for too long." The Admiral made a sound of disgust. "You have spent too much time in their broadcast, old one. You are starting to sound like them." The fleet was sent. 3,000 warships, the finest in the Armada, moved to intercept the human exodus. They formed a wall of metal and fire between the humans and the rest of the galaxy. Commander led the fleet. She was young for her rank, but she had proven herself in a dozen battles. She was not afraid of anything. Or so she thought. The first sign of trouble came when her crew started crying. Not all of them, just the ones with stronger psychic sensitivity. They would be working at their stations and suddenly tears would start running down their faces. When asked what was wrong, they could not explain. They just felt sad and hopeful and afraid and alive. Ordered them to focus. She pushed the fleet forward. They would meet the humans at the edge of the nebula and turn them toward the empty system the Council had chosen. They never got the chance. When the human fleet came into visual range, felt it too. She had always believed she had no psychic ability. She was wrong. Everyone had some ability. The humans were just strong enough to reach everyone. It started as a warmth in her chest, a feeling of connection, as if she was not alone in her command chair, as if 8 billion strangers were standing beside her, sharing their strength, sharing their fear, sharing their desperate hope. Then came the memories, not her own, human memories. A mother holding her child for the first time, an old man watching the sunset and knowing it was his last, two friends laughing at a joke that was not funny, but it did not matter because they were together, a soldier writing a letter home, not knowing if he would survive to see it delivered. The humans were not just broadcasting emotions, they were broadcasting their lives, their stories, their souls. Try to give the order to advance. The words would not come. Around her, she could hear her crew speaking in broken voices. "They are so afraid," one officer whispered. "They love each other so much," said another. "They know they might die, and they are still fighting." One by one, the ships of the fleet powered down their weapons. One by one, they opened their hangar bays. One by one, they sent the same message back to the council. "We cannot fight them. We do not want to fight them. We want to help them." 3,000 warships, the pride of the Dominion, surrendered without a single shot being fired. Not because they were defeated, but because, for the first time in their lives, they understood what it meant to feel. Sat in her command chair for a long time after her crew had left to help the refugees. She watched the human ships limp past her fleet, broken and battered and still flying. She had been a warrior her whole life. She had believed that strength meant power, that victory meant destruction. The humans had taught her something different. They had taught her that the strongest force in the universe was not a weapon. It was the refusal to give up. She stood up, straightened her uniform, and went to help. Behind her, on 1,000 screens, the human fleet moved on. 8 billion hearts beating as one. 8 billion voices, silent and screaming at the same time. They were not an army. They were a tide. And the galaxy could not stand against them. The human fleet moved through the galaxy like a slow storm. Everywhere it went, everything changed. The first world to be truly transformed was Station. It was not a planet but a massive space station, home to 2 million beings from a species called the had been fighting a civil war for 300 years. Half of them believed their god was male. Half believed their god was female. For this difference, they had killed each other by the millions. When the human fleet passed within 1 light-year of Station, the war stopped. Not slowly, not gradually, it simply stopped. Soldiers on both sides put down their weapons. Leaders who had sworn to destroy each other met in the middle of the battlefield and stood in silence. No one could explain what had happened. They just knew, suddenly and completely, that the war did not matter. They could feel the humans. They could feel 8 billion people grieving for a world that was already dead. They could feel children asking their parents if everything would be okay. They could feel old people closing their eyes and remembering what their home looked like in spring. Compared to that grief, the war seemed small. The difference between a male god and a female god seemed meaningless. They looked at each other and saw, for the first time, not enemies but family. The war that had lasted 300 years ended in one afternoon. And Station was just the beginning. On the planet Thresh, a government that had ruled through fear collapsed in a week. The people had always been afraid to speak against their leaders, but after they felt the human broadcast, they discovered something strange. The humans were afraid too. The humans were terrified, but they were still fighting. They were still speaking. They were still refusing to be silent. If the humans could be brave while their world was dying, the people of Thresh decided, then they could be brave too. They marched in the streets, they demanded change, and their leaders, who had also felt the broadcast, did not send soldiers to stop them. The leaders could feel what their people felt. For the first time, they understood the pain they had caused. Some of them resigned. Some of them wept. Some of them joined the marches. On the of the telepath, something even stranger happened. They had always believed they were the most emotionally advanced species in the galaxy. They could read minds. They could share feelings. They thought they understood connection. They were wrong. When the human broadcast reached them, every telepath on the planet felt it at full strength. It was overwhelming. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. They felt how humans loved completely, desperately, without holding anything back. They felt how humans grieved, not in quiet dignity, but in screaming, sobbing, world-shaking sorrow. They felt how humans hoped, not as a gentle wish, but as a fire that refused to go out no matter how much darkness surrounded it. The elders of gathered in their ancient council chamber. They had guided their people for 10,000 years. They had built the greatest telepathic civilization in history. And now they understood that they had been doing it wrong. "We have always been afraid of feeling too much," the oldest elder said. "We taught our children to control their emotions, to keep them small and quiet. We thought that was wisdom." She looked at the other elders with tears in her eyes. "The humans have shown us what real feeling looks like. It is not controlled. It is not quiet. It is wild and huge and terrifying and beautiful, and we have been hiding from it for 10,000 years." They did not dissolve their government that day, but they changed it. They stopped teaching their children to suppress their feelings. They started teaching them to feel fully, the way humans did. It would take generations to undo 10,000 years of emotional control, but they had begun. Across the galaxy, the same scenes played out again and again. Wars ended, tyrants fell, walls came down. Species that had not spoken to each other in centuries reached out and made peace. And the humans did not even know they were doing it. On the lead ship of the Exodus Armada, a woman named stood at a window and watched the stars go by. She was tired. Everyone was tired. They had been flying for almost a year now. Their ships were breaking down. Their food was running low. They had lost contact with so many vessels that no one knew exactly how many were still alive. But they were still flying. They were still together. They were still hopping. Did not know that her hope was changing the galaxy. She did not know that when she thought about her children, sleeping in the crowded dormitory 3 decks below, her love was being felt by beings she would never meet. She did not know that her grief for Earth, the only home she had ever known, was teaching ancient civilizations what it meant to lose something precious. She only knew that she had to keep going, for her children, for her people, for everyone who had died so that the rest could live. Behind her, a soft voice spoke. "The council has sent another message." Turned, her second in command, a man named stood in the doorway. He looked as tired as she felt. "What do they want now?" she asked. "They want to talk face to face. They say," he paused as if he could not believe what he was about to say, "they say they want to apologize." Laughed, it was not a happy sound. "Apologize for 3,000 years of silence, for killing our son, for making us think we were alone in the universe." "Yes." She turned back to the window. Outside, she could see other ships of the fleet. Broken, battered ships full of broken, battered people, her responsibility. "Tell them we will meet," she said finally. "But not because we forgive them. We are not ready to forgive. Tell them we will meet because our children need somewhere to live, because we are tired of flying, because we have been fighting to survive for so long that we have almost forgotten what we are surviving for." Nodded and left to send the message. Stayed at the window for a long time. Somewhere out there in the direction they had come from, Earth was still dying. In a few months it would be gone, her home, her history, everything her species had ever been. But her children were alive. Her people were alive. And for the first time since the journey began, someone was offering them a place to rest. It was not forgiveness. It was not even hope. But it was a start. Earth died on the 714th day of the Exodus. The scientists had predicted it would take 2 years for the sun to expand. They were wrong. The damage from the barrier was worse than anyone had calculated. Sol, the yellow star that had warmed Earth for 4 billion years, swelled into a red giant in less time than it took for the human fleet to find safety. Was asleep when it happened. She had finally allowed herself to rest after 3 days of negotiations with the conquered. They had offered the humans a system, not the empty prison they had originally planned, but a real system with habitable worlds. It was not Earth. Nothing would ever be Earth, but it was something. She was dreaming of home when the wave hit. Every human felt it at the same moment. They woke up screaming. They fell to their knees. They clutched their chests as if their hearts were being torn out, because in a way they were. Earth was gone. The blue marble that had cradled their species from its first breath. The mountains and oceans and forests and cities. The graves of their ancestors. The places where they had fallen in love, where they had raised their children, where they had lived and died for 100,000 years. Gone in a flash of expanding fire, gone forever. The grief that poured out of 8 billion humans was unlike anything the galaxy had ever experienced. It was not a wave. It was an ocean. It crashed over every mind in every system, drowning everything in sorrow so deep it felt like the end of the universe. On 1,000 worlds, beings collapsed. Telepaths screamed and went silent. Empaths curled into balls and wept for hours. Even species with no psychic ability at all felt something, a heaviness in their chest, a shadow over their thoughts, a sadness they could not explain. Admiral A was on her flagship when the wave hit. She had finally accepted the truth that her fleet would not fight the humans. Now she was escorting them toward their new home, protecting them from pirates and desperate systems that wanted to capture some of that emotional fire for themselves. When the wave struck, she fell out of her command chair. She lay on the floor, unable to move, tears streaming from all 4 of her eyes. She had never cried before. Warriors of her species did not cry. But she was not a warrior anymore. She was just another being in a galaxy full of grief. "Is this what they feel?" she whispered to no one. "Is this what they have always felt? How do they survive it?" She got her answer a few minutes later. The grief did not stop. It could not stop. 8 billion people had just lost everything they had ever known. That kind of pain does not fade quickly. But something else rose up beside it. Something that pushed through the sorrow like a green shoot through cracked stone. Resolve. The humans were grieving. They would grieve for the rest of their lives, but they were not giving up. They were holding each other. They were wiping away tears and standing up again. They were looking forward instead of back. Stood on the bridge of her ship, her face wet and her hands shaking. Around her, her crew was slowly recovering. They leaned on each other. They spoke in broken voices about the people they had lost, the places they would never see again. And then, one by one, they went back to their stations. "What do we do now?" asked. His voice was hoarse from crying. Looked out at the stars. Somewhere behind them, the light of Earth's death was still traveling outward. In a few years, beings on distant worlds would look up at the sky and see a new point of light, the last gasp of Sol, the star that had birthed humanity. "We do what we have always done," she said. "We survive, we build, we remember." She turned to face her crew. "Earth is gone. We cannot change that, but everything Earth ever was, every story, every song, every memory, every dream is still here." She pressed her hand against her chest. "In us. We are Earth now, all of us. And as long as we live, as long as we remember, Earth is not truly dead." Across the fleet, similar scenes were happening. Humans were comforting each other. Humans were making promises. Humans were choosing to live, even though part of them wanted to die. And the galaxy felt all of it. They felt the grief, yes, but they also felt what came after. They felt humans choosing hope when despair would have been easier. They felt humans loving each other harder because they had lost so much. They felt humans looking at their children and deciding that the future was worth fighting for. It was the most beautiful thing the galaxy had ever experienced. 100 years later, the Galactic Concord no longer existed. In its place stood the unified spiral, a civilization built not on treaties and fear, but on shared feeling. Every species that joined learned the lesson the humans had taught. That connection was more powerful than control, that empathy was stronger than weapons, that the ability to feel, really feel without holding back, was the greatest gift in the universe. Humanity never built an empire. They never conquered any world. They did not need to. Everywhere they went, they were welcomed. Because everywhere they went, the beings who lived there could feel what they had survived. They could feel the love that had kept the human fleet together through the darkest year in their history. On the anniversary of Earth's death, a ceremony was held on the station that orbited the humans' new sun. Beings from 100 species gathered to remember, not to mourn. Humanity had taught them that grief was not something to hide from, but to celebrate. To celebrate a world that had given the galaxy its greatest gift. High Chancellor was there, very old now but still alive. She had been one of the beings who built the barrier. She had helped kill Earth. She had lived with that guilt for a century. Was there too, even older then. She had led her people through the impossible. She had kept them together when everything was falling apart. She had taught them to hope when there was no reason to hope. The two of them stood together as the ceremony began. "I am sorry," said. She had said it many times over the years. It never felt like enough. Looked at her with eyes that had seen the death of a world. "I know," she said, "and we will never forget what you did, but we have chosen not to let it destroy us. We have chosen to build something new." She looked out at the gathered crowd, humans and aliens standing together, feeling together, living together. "This is what Earth taught us," said. "This is what we have given to the galaxy. Not weapons, not technology, not power, just this." She smiled, and every being in the station felt it. The ability to feel, the courage to feel, and the strength to keep feeling no matter how much it hurts. The ceremony ended, the beings dispersed, life went on. And across the galaxy, in every corner of every system, the fire that had started on a small blue world continued to burn. Not a fire of destruction, a fire of connection, of hope, of love. Earth was gone. But what Earth had made, what humanity had given to the stars, would last forever.